And I was like, okay. Yeah, I know that. Oh, yeah. I have one in my house. The day that I got it. The day that I got it, the day the screen. Something like right in the corner, the corner is busted apart. Like the screen's still working in the thing. So I'm like slowly trying to close it. I closed it and put it back up. And the screen went flat. Oh my God, working at it. It's not working for wiring and screen. Like that's off the apple. Love it. Why is this so straight? Yeah, mine was such a screen, and then it could have bent all like that. Like straight down the road, you know one like our road. Gas station. Yeah, the road right across it. That might go straight in installation. Yes. How? I heard that they were going to try to do one, but I don't understand how it's still not there.
Hello.
Yeah. Stop it. The computer I have right now is $59. It's very slow. It was Apple MacBook Air 13-inch for $350. I'm a What cost is that? $69. For example. But you said that we didn't need a blood test. And I already found out that the one that I bought $100 that I did beat. And it's used off of Amazon. Because when you're good with it, he said I needed it, but when I got to class, he's like, hey, you don't need this. So it's like, why is it still? I got that for $23 used on Amazon. It's used. Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's something I can borrow and then I can turn in for short credit or something later on. So I can buy a bunch more books to get. No, I got this on Amazon.
Okay, I'm gonna pass this around. Please check your name off. And we're gonna go ahead and get started. So we don't have to do any introductory stuff today. Anybody have any questions on anything? Like, why are we here? Things like that, you know, so. Okay, then I'm gonna see if I can get this to open up. And if you are Zooming, you should see the slide that says Chapter 1, Introduction to the Human Body. Let me know, make sure you can see that. So. They can't hear me so well. Okay, then I'm gonna assume that they're seeing it. And there's a response. Okay, good. That's good. Then that means that if you see it, everybody sees it. So let's go ahead and move up to where we were the other day. I think this is where we stopped, where the video stops. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this up. So we were looking at the organ systems in the body. We just started that because we were a little bit late getting started the other day. There's 11 major systems. Okay, lock that door. We got to keep our doors locked all the time. So it's a safety thing. Anyway, let's get back to this. We have 11 different organ systems in the body. The other day, we looked at a couple of them. We looked at the skin and we looked at bones. And we talked about a little bit about the things the skin does for us is protecting us from infection and generating vitamin D. We talked about the bones and how the bones move us, are used with muscles to let us move. Remember, muscles don't have the strength to do what they to do the motions we need unless they can pull on bone. Skeletal muscle can't raise our arm unless it pulls on bone, for example. And bones also produce blood for us. Even now, we're busy producing red cells and white cells in our bone marrow. There isn't much bone marrow in our bodies now where we do that. But when we were kids, it was everywhere. But we produce enough red cells and white cells constantly through our bones. Now, that's okay. Yeah, I'll get it. Okay. Muscles. Our muscles do a lot of things for us. They enable us to move. Skeletal muscle we can control. We can raise our arms and lower our arms. We can write and run and walk and talk and eat. Those are all skeletal muscles that we control. We also pump blood, and we also push food through our digestive system. And we show expression. The facial muscles allow us to show expression. How do we feel right now? You know, and I'm seeing a wide range of expressions on faces. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so anybody that's showing any kind of expressive opinion about class is showing up on your face. That's what we do. We'll see in lab, these muscles that show expression are very, very thin. They really don't do a whole lot for us except show expression. You know, you can show annoyance, you can show anger, you can show happiness, whatever, simply by the way your face, those muscles pull your skin around. Our muscles do something else for us that we're not even aware of. They help us hold up, maintain our posture. We stand upright. We generally tend not to lean forward when we stand up. And we generally, when we sit in the chair, depending on how we're sitting, you know, we, whatever position we're comfortable in, our muscles hold us that way so that we're comfortable. It maintains our posture. And our muscles produce heat. 60% of the energy that we consume, you know, if you had nobody's eating anything, but if you had an apple this morning or a bowl of cereal or, you know, a sausage biscuit and gravy or something like that, whatever you had to eat earlier today, the stored energy in there is being broken down in your body to be used. That's used in our muscles. Now, our muscles in particular can only grab about 40% of that energy. The other 60% goes off as heat. And that allows us to maintain a constant body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. So when you look at something that says it has 100 calories in it, you eat that, 60 of those calories are going to be lost as body heat. That's the price we pay to get the other 40 calories for us to do something. But you know, so our muscles are about 40% efficient in converting energy into actions, which is pretty good. You know, it's a lot better than our cars are. So, but anyway, so that gives us our constant temperature. You know, we humans are very unique in that we have a constant body temperature. Most other organisms don't have a constant body, but see, we're special. So we have this constant temperature, and our bodies are designed to run at that constant temperature. You know, the chemicals that control the reactions in our bodies are designed to work at 37 degrees or 98.6. So it's fascinating the way it all works out for us. Now, our nervous system, another system, it is the control system. It is the brain and the spinal cord and all the nerves that lead into and lead out of the brain and spinal cord, like your optic nerve. It brings signals in from the eyeball, because your eyeball has no idea what it's seeing. Your eyeball just is like a camera. It collects light rays and generates nerve impulses and has no idea what it's seeing. Where we see is actually back here at the base of the brain in the occipital lobe. That's where we process information on vision. That's where all of our association areas are, where our memories are, so that we recognize people's faces and thank you. We recognize colors and shapes and sizes and, you know, traffic lights and cars and things like that. We recognize all, you know, everything, but it's all done back here. The nervous system connects every part of our body. It is our instantaneous control system. If you put your hand down on something hot, you yank it back right away because it hurts. You don't even have to stop and think about it. That's a reflex. It processes food for us. We don't have to stop and think about that bowl of cereal I had this morning. You know, well, I better, you know, squeeze it down my esophagus a little faster because I'm, you know, to make sure I get some of that energy out of there. We don't have to do that. It does it automatically for us. It tells us when to sweat and when to shiver, and we don't have to think about it. So it is it is one of two control systems in our bodies. It is the one that's very fast acting. And when you consider the longest nerve in our body is about 3 feet long. It's called the sciatic nerve. It starts here at the hip and goes down behind your knee and all the way in at your big toe. It's about 3-4 feet long, depending on your stature. Nerve impulses travel through that nerve at 300 miles an hour. And that doesn't sound like it's really fast, but when you consider it only has to go 4 feet, 300 miles an hour is pretty amazing. That's what we see as instantaneous. You know, any of our, even the slowest nerves send at 20 to 30 miles an hour. And yet they only have to go, and those nerves only have to go like an eighth of an inch. So to us, it's always instantaneous. I want to do this out of order here. The other control system is the endocrine system, the hormones. It's a chemical system. It's a lot slower. It's a whole lot slower than the nervous system. It has a series of glands that secrete hormones. These are chemicals. We call them chemical messengers. And they take time to act. For example, you had that bowl of cereal and your blood sugar goes up because, you know, it was, you know, oh, I don't know, Lucky Charms or something, you know, it's magically delicious. Sorry, I just couldn't resist it. You had something, you know, you had a bowl of cereal, and I will tell you the secret is that most cereals are all about the same in their nutrition. Even the ones that are loaded up with, you know, marshmallow bits or something like that, the same, you'll get about the same amount of nutrition as that as you will out of a bowl of Cheerios. You know, if you eat cereals, and they're all about the same. Some just have more sugar than others, but you eat that and it's going to raise your blood sugar level a little bit. That's what it does. And that's perfectly normal. That's fine. That's what happens because, you know, we have our blood sugar stays at a pretty constant level. And when we eat something with carbohydrates in it, it goes up. And that tells our pancreas, well, our brain, it tells our brain that our blood sugar has gone up. And our brain tells the pancreas, release some insulin. You've all heard of insulin. Okay, we know about insulin. Insulin opens up channels in all the cells to allow that sugar that's in our blood to go into the cells and do something. That's the role of insulin. This is a chemical control system. We're controlling the amount of sugar in our blood. If our blood sugar goes up, we bring it back down by allowing the cells to get the sugar. And that's what insulin does. Now, how long does that take? About 20 minutes. From the time you eat the bowl of cereal to the time your sugar goes up and then comes back down is about 20 minutes. So it's a much slower system than the nervous system. But it doesn't matter because it takes that long. Because when you eat something, it takes that long to get the food into your blood supply anyway. Because when you eat a bowl of cereal, you swallow it, it goes down your esophagus, it goes into your stomach, it churns around, it squirts into your small intestine, and it gets processed some more there. And then it finally gets absorbed into your blood supply. And then it still has to go to your liver to get cleaned up. So we clean everything up in our liver before it gets into our blood. And finally, it gets into our blood supply. That's about 15 or so the 20 minutes it takes. Our blood sugar goes up, signal the brain picks up the signal that our blood sugar is up, and it tells the pancreas to make insulin, and we bring it back down. We see response, it's a fairly quick response, but it's nothing compared to the nervous system. Now, the other thing about the endocrine system, though, is while its responses are slow, some of them will last for years. Some of them will go on for years and years and years. A woman who starts ovulating at 12 years old will ovulate for 40 years, maybe. And that's totally under the control of the endocrine system. A male that produces sperm cells at 12 years old will do that until the day they die. That may be 70 years later, 80 years later. And so that is very, very long-term control that the endocrine system can do for us. So it is a slower response system, but it has very, very, very long-lasting actions. And so the two systems work together all the time. Now, the cardiovascular system, the heart and blood vessels, the heart will pump blood. It will contract every 7/10 of a second from about 3 weeks after conception, when we're about the size of like a little Advil tablet, a little aspirin tablet, something like that. We're very, very tiny. Our heart will start beating at 3 weeks after conception, and it will continue every 7/10 of a second for the next 80, 90, 100 years, over and over and over again. The heart is independent of all the other systems. It is what we call a self-starter. It sets its own rhythm. It sets its own pace. And if it stays healthy, it'll go for a long time. Every 7/10 of a second, you'll get a contraction. It's a 4-chambered heart designed to pump blood to the lungs and pump blood to the body at exactly the same time. The amount that goes to the lungs is the same amount that goes to the body. And so if you're sending 100 milliliters of blood out from your body, you're going to get 100 milliliters back on the right-hand side to go out to your lungs. And this goes over, it happens simultaneously. Don't worry about it. You're going to hear an awful lot of that when we get into AP2. So, in fact, I was just having a discussion with Morristown so that my AP2 class will have cow hearts to dissect in September. So you have something to look forward to for next spring. You'll get to do it too. So, and lungs. Okay, lymphatic system. So they don't let us out much, so we get excited about cutting up body parts and things like that. So, okay, the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is part of our immune response. We have a parallel circulatory system that runs right beside our blood vessels. See, our plasma that carries the blood cells leaks out constantly. We always think of our blood vessels as a solid tube, like a big rubber hose or something that doesn't leak, but they do. They have holes in them all over the place, and plasma leaks out. And it's designed to do that. The plasma then surrounds the cells. That's where a lot of the nutrients and minerals and ions, like salts, are going to make their way to the cells in that plasma. We call it interstitial fluid. It's a fancy term that means around the cell. Well, eventually that plasma gets collected and returned to the plasma. That plasma becomes interstitial fluid. It gets collected in these lymphatic vessels, where it's now called lymph fluid, and then it gets returned back to the blood where it's plasma again. So it's all about location. If it's in the blood, the water is all it is salt water, is plasma. If it's outside the vessels, it's interstitial fluid. If it's in the lymph vessels, it's lymph, and then it becomes plasma again. The reason we do it that way is as we pass this lymphatic vessels, pass the fluid through the lymphatic vessels, we go through lymph nodes. Y'all heard of lymph nodes. You talk about that. You're at your doctor's office and they're palpating here and they say, oh, they're swollen. you probably have an infection, or maybe they palpate under the arm. We get real excited when we're looking at lymph nodes in breast cancer, because that's usually the first place it goes to in the axillary region, because that's where our infection fighters are located. Our blood cells that fight infection are contained in the lymph nodes. And so we filter all the plasma through these lymph nodes before it comes back to the blood supply. So our lymph nodes are busy checking for infection. So the lymphatic system is a major part of our immune system for us. Now, our respiratory system, the lungs, the airway, the nasal cavity. Breathing starts with the nose, where we suck air in through the nose. The nose is a very busy place for breathing. It's designed to warm up the air. It's designed to add moisture to the air. It's designed to clean the air. And then after it's warmed and cleaned and moistened, then it goes down the trachea to the lungs, and it's cleaned again as it goes down the airway. There's mucus lining our trachea designed to pull in all the large particles that our nose didn't get. Once we get the air down into the lungs, then we have an exchange of gases in these very, very thin structures called alveoli. They're like, they look like big bunches of grapes, but they're also one cell layer thick, and each one's surrounded by a whole bunch of little tiny blood vessels called capillaries, and oxygen will leak out of the alveoli and pass right into the blood, and carbon dioxide will come out of the blood and go into the alveoli, and we breathe out the carbon dioxide. And so we do this 15 times a minute. Take a breath, suck in air, exchange it in the lungs, blow it back out, over and over and over again. And we get oxygen for the cells, and we get rid of CO2. Our digestive system is, all these systems are pretty important. Now, the digestive system isn't nearly as exciting as the heart or the nervous system, but it's very important to us. We eat something, we start the process of digestion in our mouth. We start breaking down starches in our mouth, and we continue the process. We push the partially digested food down our esophagus into our stomach. We continue the process of digestion in the stomach. We start breaking down fats and proteins there. We push everything into the first 10 inches or so of the small intestine. We continue breaking down fats and proteins there, and the carbohydrates. And then that's the last chance for us to do anything as far as breaking things down. And then the next 20 feet or so of the small intestine, we absorb nutrients, and we get into the large intestine, and everything that we couldn't absorb or use ends up as waste matter, and we get rid of it. And even then, before we get rid of it, we suck out as much water as we can from the undigestible matter. The feces that we expel are only about 70% water. We pulled 30%, and that sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but it's also about 30% solid, and we get rid of a lot of water. We recover a lot of water that way. We also have bacteria that live in our large intestine that act on the undigestible material and produce some vitamins that we need, like vitamin K. Vitamin K is very important to us in blood clotting. So even before we get rid of the fecal matter, we're getting something good out of it. We're getting vitamins and we're getting water. So, and all the nutrients that we take in all get absorbed into the blood supply at the small intestine, but before it goes anywhere, it has to go to the liver. And we have a special circuit, special blood vessel that takes everything to the liver, because the liver has to clean up everything that we eat and everything that we drink before it goes into our blood supply. Now, the urinary system gets rid of nitrogenous waste. the proteins in our bodies will, we're constantly remaking those and they're being broken down. And proteins have nitrogen in them. In fact, it's actually ammonia. And so we have to get rid of these wastes. If we don't get rid of them, they're going to accumulate and kill us in about 48 hours if our kidneys fail. The kidneys are designed to filter our blood 60 times a day. So our entire blood supply is filtered 60 times a day. We run it through the kidneys over and over and over again. The waste products ultimately end up in the urine, and we remove it from the body when we pee. And we pee out about 1.5 liters of fluid a day. And we recover that, we replace that by drinking water or anything with water in it. We also regulate our salt levels through our kidneys. We regulate our potassium and calcium levels in our kidneys, and we even help to regulate our sugar levels too. We will have sugar in our urine until we start running through the kidney tubules, and we'll suck all the sugar back out. So we don't have any, when we pee, the urine should be sugar-free. So, okay. Now, good use of x-rays here. Our digestive system doesn't like sharp objects. Large nails are not good. What I find fascinating is that for whatever reason, you'll notice that some are already being processed into the large intestine down at the bottom of the image. What we do have here is an almost perfect outline of the shape of the stomach up there with those 87 nails up at the top, because the stomach is shaped sort of like, it sits here and it forms a shape sort of like a J laying on its side. And that's sort of taking the shape of the stomach up there. And all I can think of is that has got to really hurt. So, but, some people do strange things. What can I say? I would think that the ones down here at the bottom of the picture are going to hurt even more coming out than the ones up here, because at least they can go in and get these. So, but when someone has a penetrating object like that, a metal object, there is nothing better than X-ray for identifying that. And fractures. X-rays are great for fractures. Not all the imaging that we have is ideal for everything. X-rays don't do anything much for us for soft tissue. I mean, you can barely see the organs in place here. You can see the small and large intestine only because they've been filled with air. That's why they're standing out. You can't see anything else. You can't see the kidneys or the heart or lungs or the liver or anything like that. Okay, reproductive systems. Male and female reproductive systems are designed to produce the gametes, the eggs and the sperm. They also produce the sex hormones, the testosterone in males and estrogen and progesterone in the females. The female reproductive system also provides a place for the growth and development of the baby, and will provide food for the baby, nourishment for the baby later on from the mammary glands. That is part of the female reproductive system too. The basis of this is to produce what we call the gametes, the reproductive cells, that have they are gametes that are considered haploid. They each have half the total number of chromosomes. Questions on any of the organ systems? Okay, well, let's go on then. Things we need to have to live. This little pyramid chart here. If we take a look at the pyramid, this is another one of those where we start out with the chemicals that make up our body at the bottom of the pyramid and end up with us at the top of it here. The things we have to pay attention to are organization and boundaries and metabolism and responsiveness, movement, development, growth, and reproduction. So let's take a look at this. we are very organized. From the smallest molecules to the complete human, everything fits together. You know, we don't like randomness. We don't like disorder. So everything works together. All the chemicals come together to make cells and organelles. Organelles are like little organs inside the cells, and we get tissues and organ systems and the organism itself. Now, our cells are a lot like us. Cells like to have their space. Cells don't like to be crowded. You know, cells have something known as contact inhibition. They don't like to have another cell crowded next to it. It's sort of like when you're in line somewhere, let's say if you're at Dollywood or something and you're in line, and you got that one person who is right up behind you, you know, in your space. How much do we all like that? You know, right, exactly. You know, you're shaking your head, or I'm right there with you, you know. My personal space extends out about 20 feet now. I'm just, you know, but, you know, I mean, it's the same thing you get in the elevator. You know, if you ride the elevator, if you're in there by yourself, you stand in the middle, someone comes in, you both go to the opposite corners. You ever notice that? You know, got to have a space. Cells are the same way. They have to have boundaries, and to protect the inside of the cells have a membrane to hold everything in, but also to protect them from other cells. We're the same way. We have our skin. Our skin protects our internal structures from the outside. So we have boundaries. We've set our boundaries. And of course, then we have the psychological boundary of, you know, you're in my space, you know, and nobody likes to get crowded like that. So now, what about metabolism? That was the third thing on this list. Metabolism is the term we use to describe all the chemical actions taking place in our bodies at any given time. You probably heard the term metabolic rate, metabolic activity, things like that. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at how rapidly do we break down food, for example. How fast do we break down food? You know, we eat protein, we eat carbohydrates, we eat fats, in whatever form, you know, all proteins doesn't matter the source, but they're all pretty much the same. There's only 20 amino acids that make up all the proteins ever. So we eat proteins, we eat carbohydrates, we eat fats. Those are the big three. We break that down. We break it down and then we build it back up. The chemical reactions that occur, the metabolic rate involves the release of energy to do things and to build up and make new molecules. We have a term called catabolism, or like a catabolic reaction. A catabolic reaction will release energy. Let's see if I have my matches over here. One little mistake, it took my matches away. If you light a match, yeah, that's a chemical reaction. You are releasing energy. You ignite the match and the flame burns, and it burns. If it's a wooden match, it burns the wood. That is a chemical reaction releasing energy. You are breaking down the organized molecules in the wood and in the chemicals around the top of the wood, and you are releasing the energy that holds the wood together and holds the chemical together. That is a catabolic reaction. When you eat something, you're doing the same thing. You're eating, you know, an apple, a banana, a donut, a hot dog. You go to McDonald's or whatever. You know, here McDonald's going to have the chicken Big Mac. You see that? They're going to make a Big Mac out of chicken. So who knew? Who knew? So so you eat a chicken Big Mac. It's still got energy inside of it. It's got carbohydrates. It's got fats. It's got a lot of protein probably. And you're going to break those large molecules down and release the energy, and you can use it. Remember, a Big Mac is like 650 calories. 40% of of those calories are going to go to your body as energy, and the other 60% are going to go off as heat. But you get calories, and calories are not necessarily a bad thing. Calories are just a way we measure energy. Catabolic reactions release that energy for us to do something with it, whether we're eating something or burning something. Now, once we get that energy, we can do stuff. We can move, we can run, we can talk, we can walk, we can pump blood, we can breathe. And we can also build up other molecules. That's anabolism, taking small molecules and building them into large molecules. We eat protein, but we need to make, but it's not the protein that we want to use. You eat a chicken Big Mac, for example. The chicken's full of protein, but that's not the protein that you want. You need to make protein for eye color or hair color or skin color, or you need to make protein to wrap around your bones to make them good and strong. There's a protein called collagen. You may have heard of collagen. Collagen is the most abundant protein in our body. It is the strongest protein physically, and we use it for all sorts of stuff, including wrapping it around our bones to make them resilient to stress. All of our tendons that attach to our bones are made of collagen. Collagen is so strong that it'll break a bone before the collagen itself, before a tendon tears. So it's amazing stuff. Well, that's a protein, but it's not the same shape of protein that we find in chicken breast. So we take the chicken breast and break it down to its amino acids, because all proteins are made of amino acids, and then we apply energy to it and we rearrange it and make our protein that we want. We take little molecules and turn them into big molecules, and we use energy for that. Think about baking a cake. You take all the ingredients to bake a cake, mix it all together, put it in a pan, put it in the oven, don't do anything else. What are you going to have? Pan full of batter, right? Not that cake batter is not a bad thing, but you're not going to get a cake until you turn the oven on, right? And then it heats up. It applies energy. And now you've changed it. You've taken a whole bunch of little molecules from the eggs and the oil and the milk and the flour and the sugar and the flavoring, mixed it together, and then applied a lot of energy to it for a half an hour or so. And we have a transformation from this loopy, disorganized mess of batter into a cake. And now the cake has calories. It has stored energy. The energy that you put into the system is now available for you to use later on when you eat the cake. So metabolism, this is what's going on in our bodies all the time. Constant chemical reactions, building up and breaking down constantly. So, and it's all about energy. Catabolic reactions release energy. When you eat something and you're breaking it down, you're releasing the energy stored in the chemical bonds of the food, and that's for us to use. And then later on, you're using that energy to build things back up. Maybe you want to make protein for hair color or eye color, or maybe you want to make collagen, or maybe you want to make an enzyme that you need for a chemical reaction to work. And maybe you just need some carbohydrates for energy because you're in a marathon or something. Anybody ever run a marathon in here? Marathon runners tend to do a lot of carbohydrate loading before their race, before they go off. A lot of pastas are part of their diet, like in the morning of the race. They're going to load up in that. So because the pastas are complex carbohydrates, it takes a whole lot more time to break down the starches in noodles or spaghetti or something like that, as opposed to a couple of chocolate donuts, and and those are gonna break down really fast. So they want to have this catabolic reaction take time for them to give them the energy they need. So, and we'll talk a lot about this in chapter 24. We also are responsive. We respond to stimuli. We respond to noises and odors. We respond to touch and pressure and pain. If someone in the hallway drops a large can and it bounces around, or we hear a lot of breaking glass, which we don't want to hear, we're probably going to look in that direction. If there's a bright flash of light outside, maybe there's a thunderstorm going on, there's a bright flash of light from lightning, we're all going to invariably look at the window because we're attracted by the flash. That's a stimulus. If we put our hand down on something very hot or very cold, we're going to yank our hand back. If we get cold, we're going to shiver. If we get hot, we're going to sweat. We are going to respond to a stimulus all the time. And we're always doing it. I mean, think about it at night. You're asleep, but your ears are still working. You may or may not hear noises outside. It depends. You may sleep through a storm. You may sleep through noisy traffic. On the other hand, if you have a small child, if your child coughs or sneezes or cries in the middle of the night, that tends to penetrate through into your subconscious and wake you up because your ears still work. That's a stimulus we respond to. See, our bodies also have the ability to filter out background noise. Unfortunately, it doesn't filter out your crying kid at 3 in the morning when you're trying to sleep. But if you haven't been there, you probably will at some point. So, are you nodding in agreement, or are you just yes? Yeah. So, so we are responsive. We see things. We respond to visual input. The light turns yellow and you're driving down the road. And this is always a good question. What do?
Speed up. Speed up.
Thank you. Yes, that is the number one answer. That's not what's in the driver's manual, but that is the number one answer. Everybody speeds up. But then there are qualifiers. What if there's a car in front of you from Ohio and they don't believe in speeding up?
Slow down.
Yeah, then you have to slow down. Or even worse, there's a car with blue lights in front of you or behind you. It all depends. But most of us are going to speed up when that light turns yellow. If we're close enough, we're going through. So, or you end up saying things about the car from Ohio that stopped, 100 feet before the light. So, and we've all been there. So, oh, did you see in the news that Pigeon Forge and Sevierville have finally gotten it together to synchronize all 68 traffic lights from 407 to the spur, so that you should theoretically be able to drive from 407 straight to the spur without having to stop for a light. Theoretically. Yeah. And I will believe that when I see it. So, but they've been talking about that for years. Okay, movement. We are moving constantly. Our heart is pumping blood every 7/10 of a second. It's contracting every 7/10 of a second. Our respiratory system inhales and blows out air every 4 seconds, 15 times a minute. Our smooth muscle, which surrounds our blood vessels, is shifting blood around to where we need it. And it's also squeezing food through our digestive system all the time. Our urinary bladder is filling up and wants to release that at some point. And when it's ready to go, it will contract and push that urine out through your urethra. We are moving our skeletal muscles around all the time too. You're just sitting here, moving around in your chair, moving your arms, taking notes, maybe whatever you're doing. Putting my arm up and down. That's using the skeletal muscles. We are using those muscles all the time. And we're also holding our body together. The joints here at the shoulder and at the hip are held in place by the muscles that surround those joints. If we didn't have the muscles in place, our shoulders would pop out of the sockets. Yeah, and not that that doesn't happen sometimes, but we would be very uncomfortable if it happened all the time. We undergo development. We change. We change constantly from the time we are, from the point of conception to age 23, we are constantly changing, and we're changing rapidly. We grow. It's not until we get to about 23 years old that we stop growing in stature. That's when all of our bones finally stop their growth. We slow down in our late teens, and then we usually stop by around age 23. We grow and we differentiate into different structures. The idea that we are just a mass of cells when we are in the uterus that has no shape or reason or structure only applies for about the first 2 days after conception. We are a ball of cells for about on day 2. We haven't even gotten to the uterus yet, but by the time we get to the uterus, we are very organized and structures are starting to form. 3 weeks after conception, we have a heart in place and it's beating. 6 weeks after conception, when we are still extraordinarily tiny, we have a complete skeleton in place. And from 6 weeks after conception until age 23, we are putting calcium in there and turning that very soft skeleton into bone. And it continues, and we grow and we grow and we grow. We reach our adult stature. And then once we reach adulthood, then we go into more of a maintenance mode. But we're busy replacing things that wear out up to a point. And then we move on into old age and then eventually die. Now, our bodies will under a constant process of change and development throughout our lifetimes. Now, growth, some cells can get larger, bone cells can enlarge, our body size can change. If your goal is to be an Olympic weightlifter and you start working out every day, your bones are going to get larger. You're going to make more bone cells. Your muscles will enlarge. You won't grow new muscle cells. Whatever muscle cells we had at birth are what we're stuck with. We don't grow new muscle cells. We can make them bigger, but we can't grow new ones. So exercise and protein allows the muscles to get larger. The bones can grow, the bones can get bigger. So we can continue to see growth in size, not in stature, but in size throughout our lifetime, if the demand's there. And we have reproduction. And it's not just producing gametes for sexual reproduction. Cells wear out, so we have to replace them. Many of our cells are going to wear out over time, and we undergo what's known as mitosis and cell division to replace them because they wear out. Skin cells are wearing out all the time. The skin cells on the surface of your skin are dead now. They're just being shed constantly. We don't see it, but they're constantly being shed because we got new ones coming up underneath. Now, we don't notice it because it doesn't hurt because they're dead cells. When you cut yourself and you bleed, you have to get through the epidermis into this layer underneath called the dermis because all the blood vessels are in the dermis. So, it would be very painful if every time we rubbed our hand against a hard surface that we were bleeding from it. That would not be good. Because because think of all the times every time we're doing something, we're losing skin cells. We're not aware of it because the pain cells aren't being the pain sensors aren't being activated. They're a little deeper. We're not bleeding. But when we cut ourselves, we bleed and it hurts. Those nasty little paper cuts. We all know how unpleasant they can be because they just won't stop bleeding either. Or you nick yourself, or we injure ourselves all the time, and it hurts and bleeds. But think about all the things we do we are not aware of because we're dealing with cells that are already dead, but we are constantly replacing the stuff that wears out. Okay. Now to survive, we have a handful of requirements that are absolutes. We have some narrow ranges on here too. We have to have oxygen, and we have to have food and water and a normal body temperature, and we have to have the right air pressure too. So oxygen. Atmospheric air that we're breathing right now is 20% oxygen and 80% nitrogen, more or less. There's some trace gases thrown in there too, but it's mostly 80-20. Without atmospheric air, without oxygen, we'll die in about 5 minutes. The central nervous system is so sensitive to the needs for oxygen, it can't survive for more than 5 minutes or so. And the air has to be, the air is always going to be, unless it's like, in a 100% oxygen environment or something, the air we're breathing is always about 20% oxygen. So we got to keep it at that level. Nutrients, we have to have food. We have to have carbohydrates for energy. Carbohydrates, are looked at as, by some nutritionists as evil, but we still have to have a certain amount of carbs in our diet. Excessive amounts of carbohydrates, excessive amounts of any food are probably not the best thing for us, but carbohydrates are essential because it's our bodies are designed to run off of glucose, which is a simple sugar. The best way to get simple sugars is to eat carbohydrates and break them down. Starches, like when you eat a potato, potatoes is made of starch. Starch is a complex carbohydrate. If you break the starch down, starch is nothing but a whole chain of simple sugars, simple glucoses linked together in thousands and thousands and thousands of units. So we break it down. We need proteins for all the chemical reactions in our bodies and for building up our cells. And fats. Fats is another one of those words that everybody looks at as evil. The food industry likes to manufacture foods that are fat-free, or sugar-free. The trouble is that we need a certain amount of fats in our diet too. And most healthcare providers will tell you that the problem is not the fats that we consume in our diet. The problem is excessive consumption of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, none of these, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, none of these are bad. The magic word is moderation. It's when they're consumed in excess that they become trouble. And it's the carbohydrates that cause more trouble than the fats. But fats have, been getting, fats have been evil for years, right up there with eggs, because eggs are full of cholesterol. Oh, evil, so it just goes back and forth and back and forth. Anyway, we got to have minerals and vitamins. Anybody take vitamins in here? Okay. Vitamins, we don't think much about them, but a multivitamin a day is not a bad thing to take. Because there are certain minerals that we need to have in our diet. We need to have iron, we need to have iodine, we need to have calcium. A lot of this stuff we can pick up, these minerals we can pick up in vitamins. The thing about a vitamin is that if some is good, more is not necessarily better. Our bodies only take a certain amount of the vitamin anyway and use it. The rest of it, it runs down the drain. So, but we still need some. Water makes up 70% of our body's weight. We have a lot of water weight in our bodies. We use water for cooling. We use water for cushioning. We use water for generating mucus and saliva. And it is it's what we use to carry blood cells around in our bodies. We use it for the cerebrospinal fluid that surrounds our brain so our brain can float inside our skull, because our brain can't support its own weight. So we have to have a lot of water. The thing about water is that if we can go for a month without food, but we can only go 3 days without water. And if we go, and the trouble is in that third day, you know, we're sort of having we're probably having a psychotic episode at that point because we're so water deprived that we become irrational. We can no longer hunt for water. So, you know, water is much more critical to us than food supplies. Body temperature, we got to try and stay somewhere around 98.6, 37 degrees. Our bodies don't like it if we have a high fever or if our temperature drops, because in both cases, the rates of chemical reactions that we have to have in our body start breaking down. Our bodies are very sensitive to how our metabolic rates work. We don't like changes around the temperature. Now, air pressure. Now, remember I said that we are 20% oxygen in our atmospheric air. And it doesn't matter if we are at 1,000 feet above sea level, like we are right here, or if we are 10,000 feet above sea level. Now, the amount of air pressure pushing down on us right here is about 760 millimeters of mercury. You know, we can't feel it, but that's the measured pressure, you know, that's pushing down on us. Now that converts to something, you know, when they give the weather on TV and they say the barometric pressure is like 30.57 inches of mercury or whatever, and that relates some. I can't do the metric conversion on that, but you know, 760 is probably somewhere in that neighborhood. You know, it's still talking about the amount of pressure pushing down on us from the column of air that extends all the way out to the edge of the atmosphere. We don't feel that. It's always 20% oxygen. Now, if we go to 10,000 feet, you know, for example, the Rocky Mountain National Park counterpart to Gatlinburg is Estes Park. Estes Park is the entrance to Rocky Mountain National Park, like Gatlinburg leads into the Smoky Mountain National Park. Problem is that at Estes Park, they're at 10,000 feet elevation. The air pressure there is half of what it is here. So if it's 760 millimeters here, it's about 380 millimeters in Estes Park. It's still 20% oxygen. Now, what causes the pressure? Well, it's all those little molecules of oxygen and nitrogen floating around. We don't see them, but they're there because we're alive. Okay, so we know they're there. But you go up 10,000 feet and that number, the amount of oxygen molecules and the amount of nitrogen molecules are cut in half. Still 20%, but now we're at 20% of 360 millimeters of pressure. So instead of having 1 billion oxygen molecules floating around, now you only have 500 million. And instead of whatever, you know, the 80% nitrogen, it's cut in half. It's still 80%, but it's half of what it was. Now, what does all that mean? Well, it means that if you go to Estes Park, Colorado from here this afternoon, you know, Walker State field trip, we'll all go to Estes Park. And this is personal experience. You stand at the traffic light, the light turns green and you get the walk light, which should really say crawl. And so you try to run across the street, you get about halfway across and discover that my blood, which is used to 760 millimeters of air pressure with lots of oxygen, can't handle this. Oxygen's cut in half. Because I was in Estes Park and tried to run across the street and got about halfway across and I couldn't breathe. Because yes, the amount of oxygen was still 20% of what's in the air, but it was only half of what it was where I'd been earlier that day when I flew out to Colorado. So in Virginia, it was just like it is here, but there it was in half. And it took about 3 days to get used to it, to acclimate to that lower pressure. Now that's fine. We can, here we are at sea level. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. There we are at sea level, but what if we go up to here? The pressure drops. Now we can still survive at 10,000 feet, but what if we go to 20,000? It gets cut in half again. Now the air pressure, instead of being 380, drops down to 190. If I did the math right. So the air pressure is cut in half again. It's still 20% oxygen, but there's a whole lot less oxygen molecules floating around for us to breathe in than there were even at 10,000 feet. You can't survive at 20,000 feet without some sort of, source of oxygen. So air pressure is very, very important to us in what we can breathe. When we go into space, if people go to the space station, the space station is an artificial environment. Are they growing their own food? Mostly not, but I mean, there's some experiments that are going on. Where are they getting their oxygen? It's all being brought up to them. Where are they getting their water? It's all being brought to them. So you can survive in the space station, but you can't thrive because you have no natural sources there of food, water, and oxygen. It has to all be brought in. So when they send that, NASA is sending a rocket, the Orion rocket. It's going to put a capsule that will loop around the moon. It's going to be in space for 30 days to test this. It's a human rated capsule. So it's our return to the moon. Now, if they're going to be in space for 30 days, they're going to have, you okay? So they're going to have to provide their own sources of food and water and oxygen there. So these resources have to be there all the time. Okay. Now the term that, do you need to go out? Oh, are you sure? Okay. So you get extra credit for collapsing, but not a lot. Okay. Homeostasis, a term that you are going to get so tired of hearing me say. Homeostasis means staying in equilibrium, staying in balance, maintaining your status quo, keeping your blood pressure at 120/80 and your heart rate at 70 and your breathing rate at 15 and your blood sugar at 80, keeping your cholesterol at a normal level, things like that. This is what homeostasis is all about, maintaining equilibrium. So all the parameters in your metabolic rate and your internal conditions are within safe ranges, normal ranges. And so all of our organ systems work together to maintain equilibrium. If our blood pressure drops, our heart will pick up the pace to make to bring it back up. So if our heart rate increases to bring our blood pressure back up, if our blood pressure gets too high, our heart will slow down. If we exercise, while we're exercising, we tend to breathe faster. Now, this is a trick question. When we breathe faster, why are we breathing faster after exercise? Well, good point. Your heart rate's up. That's good. You're trying, and you're trying to, you breathe faster. So, your heart's beating, you're sending more blood around and with more oxygen in, so your cells will be happy. But let me rephrase the question. What gas controls our breathing rate? You only have two choices. Is it oxygen or carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide. Very good. Carbon dioxide controls our breathing rate. We got more oxygen than we know what to do with in our blood. every time a red blood cell makes a pass through our body, it takes about 20 seconds. Every time it makes a pass through our body, it gives up about 20% of its oxygen. That's all. The other 80% is still there. We have a real nice reserve. So we don't use up all the oxygen in every red cell every time we send it around the body. So we've got plenty of oxygen. When we exercise, we burn more carbohydrates. And the process of burning carbohydrates generates carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide enters into our blood supply to be carried to the lungs. In doing so, it forms something known as carbonic acid. Carbon dioxide and water. It's a very weak acid, but it forms carbonic acid and makes our blood a little more acidic. And our brain says, our blood's acidic. I need to get rid of that acidity. So the fastest way to get rid of the acidity is to breathe faster, to blow off the CO2. So when we become more acidic during exercise, we simply breathe faster to blow off the extra CO2. So what really controls our breathing rate at exercise is the need to get rid of carbon dioxide. And it's part of this homeostasis. We want to get our acid levels back down to normal in our blood, so we breathe faster. We're trying to reach homeostasis as quick as we can. If we get hot, we sweat. If we get hot, we sweat. If we get cold, we shiver. That's okay. Response to stimulus. I heard the sound of the knocking and I opened the door. So that's a classic example. Thank you. So if we get cold, we shiver. If we get hot, we sweat. These are all means of maintaining homeostasis. And the whole process of homeostasis involves three parts. We always have a receptor, a sensor that detects a stimulus. There might be a temperature sensor in your skin. It might be something measuring how acidic your blood is. It might be measuring your blood pressure. All these things are going to be receptors and respond to a stimulus. Now, the receptor can't do anything. It doesn't even know what it's recepting. All it knows is when the right stimulus is applied to it, it sends a nerve impulse to the brain. A temperature receptor has no idea it's temperature. It just like, when I'm activated, I send this signal. The brain interprets that as, our temperature on our skin is going up. And it says, here's what we have to do. We have to sweat. So we have a receptor, we have a control center. The brain's a control center. And it sends a signal out to the effector. That's the third part, the sweat gland, and says, release the water so we can cool down. So the sensory receptor detects the heat, the brain interprets what it is and tells the sweat gland to start releasing water so we can cool down. And we will perspire to cool off until we get back down to our normal temperature. So homeostasis is designed to bring us back. We want to stay at homeostasis, so we use a mechanism with these three parts here to get us back to homeostasis. We use what's known as negative feedback. This is the negative feedback loop. If we get hot, the stimulus is that our temperature is higher than 98.6 or 37 degrees C. The sensory receptors in our skin tell us that we're hot. The brain processes that and says, hey, we're too hot. We need to cool down. And it activates the sweat glands. Sweat glands release water. We lose heat through evaporative cooling. Our body temperature cools back down to 98.6 and we stop sweating. Negative feedback reverses the stimulus. That's what negative feedback means. It is, the stimulus is heat, so we reverse it. And that's why we call it negative. The negative feedback loop will always reverse the initial stimulus. We use this for controlling just about everything in our bodies. Blood glucose, blood sugar, and insulin. When we eat something and our blood sugar levels go up, we detect that, and the brain tells the pancreas, hey, our blood sugar is too high, let's have some insulin. We have insulin that comes out. It opens up the cell membranes of the cells in our bodies, and the sugar goes into our cells, and our blood sugar levels come back down to normal. We do this all the time when we eat something, when we drink something. You drink a Coke, you drink anything with carbohydrates in it, you eat anything with carbohydrates in it, your blood sugar will go up, insulin gets released, the sugar goes into the cells, the sugar level in the blood drops back down to normal. That's how we get carbohydrates into our cells. We reverse the stimulus. The stimulus was excessive, blood sugar up, bring it back down. And up, this little figure 8 shaped diagram here, on the top, we see what happens if we eat something. We can see the blood glucose levels go up after we eat. The pancreas releases insulin. The cells in the body take up the glucose, because what insulin does is opens up channels in the cell membranes to let sugar come in. If we have excessive levels of sugar, anything left over, we store in our liver as something called glycogen. Glycogen, humans store extra sugars, extra carbohydrates as something called glycogen. We don't store starch. We're not like a potato. A potato will store the starch, or beans or carrots, anything like that. It'll store the starchy foods, but we store it as glycogen. Still, it's the same thing. Glycogen is long chains of sugars linked together. Starch is long chains of sugars linked together. Just humans stored as glycogen. Now, if we failed to eat anything this morning and we're hungry and our blood sugar levels drop below what we call the set point where we want to keep it, then our pancreas, instead of releasing insulin, will release another hormone called glucagon. Glucagon acts on the stored glycogen in the liver to break it down to glucose, which gets released and brings our blood sugar back up to normal. So either way, we're either bringing our sugar down or bringing our sugar up. Those commercials that were out, you're not yourself without a Snickers bar. You remember that? Because otherwise you look like Betty White. So there is a basis in fact in those kind of commercials, because the Snickers bar provided carbohydrates and fats and protein from the peanuts. As far as a candy bar goes, it's not bad as far as nutrition. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with any food. It just depends on how much we eat of it. But the Snickers bar provided protein and fats and carbohydrates. And obviously the implication was that by eating the Snickers bar, you would bring your blood sugar back up and bring your protein level back up, and you'd have stored fats for energy. So it was a little bit of an exaggeration, but there was a lot of truth in that commercial. So anyway. Okay, we'll start up on positive feedback loops on Tuesday. If you're in lab this afternoon, we're going to look at the microscope, the parts of the microscope, and we're going to look at epithelial cells. So make sure you print those two off. So, and I will try to be as unboring as possible. So.